But back to influencers, it is a key part of our strategy. We are definitely spending marketing dollars on influencers. We have really been doing a program of influencer screenings, and each one has to be curated with the right influencer. We are creating atmospheres that give that full picture.
This is the Boxoffice Podcast. I'm Rebecca Pahle, Deputy Editor at Boxoffice Pro, the Pulse of Theatrical Exhibition, joined here for our 201st episode by my co-host Chad Kennerk, analyst at Boxoffice Pro, and Russ Fischer of Boxoffice Studios, which provides editorial content to movie theaters. Guys, how you doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, thanks to you both for filling in for me last week as I was at Show East and I think I was literally on a plane on my way to Show East in Miami. My first time at that conference, a great time. Our feature interview this week is actually with the winner of the Coca-Cola Empowerment Award at Show East, Rebecca Stein, who's the Vice President of Studio Relations and U.S. Marketing at Showcase Cinemas. She has a lot of really interesting things to say on the evolution of marketing and of using influencers to drum up enthusiasm for films and tapping into youth audiences. We're going to be definitely talking about the power of youth audiences later on in this podcast episode. A lot to talk about with regards to the, I think it's fair to say, unanticipated success of Five Nights at Freddy's from Universal. But before we get to that, Russ, any updates on the SAG-AFTRA front regarding the strike, the possible ending thereof?
So both parties in the strike negotiation met, and they met through the weekend, and those negotiations were evidently somewhat productive. They concluded yesterday evening, that would be Sunday, October 29th, with both parties, I think, agreeing to separate and take most of the day today, Monday, October 30th, to kind of like sort out what had been proposed, what had been put on the table, and they're going to reconvene. I know that SAG-AFTRA sent out an email to members, which says, over the course of the weekend, we have discussed all open proposals, including artificial intelligence, with the AMPTP. Both parties will be working independently Monday and re-engage on scheduling at the end of the day. So, hopefully both sides are going to take in everything that was discussed over the last few days. And, with any luck, they'll be back at the table sometime this week. So this is certainly better news than the last time they sat down, when everybody just, when the AMPTP basically seemed to kind of flip the table as they got up and left the door. So, this is better news than last time. It's good news. It's not the news we want, which is the end of the strike, but, maybe we're getting there.
Yeah, at least the negotiations are happening. Maybe we'll hear some better news between when we record this on Monday and when the podcast comes out on Thursday. But of course, as the strike is not over at this point, sadly, and thus actors cannot, under the rules of the strike, under the rules of SAG-AFTRA, cannot promote their films. We are continuing to see a number of release date changes kind of from a variety of studios. I know that there have been some reported on the Disney side.
Yeah, Elio, the next film from Pixar, has moved from March 1st, 2024 to June 13th, 2025.
My initial reaction to that was wondering if 2024 would be the first year since 2014 without a new Pixar movie. But then realized that Inside Out 2 is coming in June 2024. So we'll just have that as the new Pixar movie for 24, and then Elio as the new movie for 25, which actually I think is better for Pixar overall. They've had years where they did two movies, and it seems like the single movie per year release schedule is probably in everyone's best interests.
Yeah, definitely give them a little bit of time to miss you. That seems to be the tactic, or at least part of the reasoning behind one of Paramount's release changes. They are moving the 8th Mission Impossible film, which was supposed to come out in June of next year, to May of 2025. We're also hearing that it's going to have a new subtitle, like it's not going to be Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 2. Those titles are so dang unwieldy. I'm glad that they're changing it.
I mean, I think the part 1, part 2, we've seen a couple of different franchises initially announce part 1 and part 2. I mean, Avengers Endgame originally was going to be Avengers Infinity War part 2. They had announced those movies as a part 1 and part 2. The second and third Spider-Verse movies were originally announced as a part 1 and a part 2 scenario. I think it's very smart to move away from that naming convention. And frankly, it's surprising that McQuarrie and Cruise managed to keep that convention for the first part of Dead Reckoning, because I think as an audience member, yeah, you want to go in thinking you're going to get a whole experience, even if you know it's part of an ongoing franchise. And I think the part 1, part 2 thing just tells you like, nope, this isn't going to be whole. And so I think it's smart to move away from the part 2 with Mission Impossible. And it makes you wonder if part 1 is going to be retroactively renamed.
Yeah. I wonder if like audience notes or reaction or reception with Dune had anything to do with being like, maybe we want to give these separate titles and not go with a part 1, part 2. But that's entirely speculation on my part. So,
and the thing is, like, the original Dune wasn't released as part 1. It was just released as Dune, you know.
And then when part 1 comes up at the end, you're like, oh, yeah, come on.
Yeah. And so Dune Part 2, I understand why they've kept that, because it is explicitly broken up into 2 parts. But you go back and look at the way Dune was released, it was not positioned as a part 1. They were like, no, you're going to see a whole movie. And then, and it speaks to how well people liked Dune, that wasn't a stumbling block, not a big enough one to impede its success, at least.
Chad, we have had a couple other release date changes, though I believe nothing quite as large. The Mission Impossible 8 moving about a year has been the biggest release date change we've seen over the past week or so. But what else are we looking at? I know there's some other stuff from Paramount. We had a few Universal changes, Warner Brothers changes, and then a new film announcement from Universal Blumhouse.
Right. So IF, which stands for Imaginary Friends, it's John Krasinski's next film, originally scheduled for May 24th of 2024. That's actually moved up a couple days to May 17th, 2024. And then speaking of John Krasinski, the next Quiet Place film, which is actually a prequel, A Quiet Place Day One, was previously scheduled for March 8th, 2024. And that one's moving back a bit to June 28th, 2024. And then we also have this untitled animated SpongeBob SquarePants film. I feel like they previously released a title for this.
Now I guess it's back to untitled.
Yeah, it was something about a dead man's chest or pirates, something or other. Previously dated May 23rd, 2025. That one's going to Christmas season, December 19th, 2025.
And then we do have a very small, thankfully small change from Warner Brothers moving Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Don't worry, it is still coming out this December. It is moved from December 20th to the 22nd. So is that like a Wednesday to a Friday?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it had been the 22nd originally, and then they pulled it forward to Wednesday, and now they're pushing it back to Friday again. I'm sure there is a strategy.
Right. Make up your mind, guys. Yeah, we'll see how that goes out. Also, another title change from Warner Brothers. This film it used to be called The Wise Guys, starring Robert De Niro and Deborah Messing. Used to be on February of 24. Now will be November of 24. Now is titled Alto Nights. We were discussing this a bit before recording. I hear Alto Nights. I have no idea what sort of film this is.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's Barry Levinson movie, so a prestige director. It's De Niro playing 2 roles. Basically, he's playing 2 rival mob bosses in New York in the 40s and 50s. So almost playing into stereotype of past De Niro roles. But seeing him play 2 roles in the same movie, that's kind of cool. Wise Guys certainly tells you what this movie is right off. I hear Alto Nights.
It's a bit on the nose, but
it's on the nose, but you kind of have to be on the nose. It's funny, on a lot of social media, I saw people kind of mocking the main posters for Killers of the Flower Moon, like, oh, these are not very artful. And then there were a couple of more artful posters that came out, and it's like, this is how you sell a movie. I'm like, no, the ugly poster with all the faces pasted on it is how you sell a movie. that's what gets people to go. And it's kind of the same thing. Like
if you want a poster to like sell for $250 down the line on the secondary market, that's when you have the
that's
fancy,
what the art
like the very
that's what the art
artistic
poster is for. And that's cool, but that doesn't put butts in seats. In the same way here, I'm like, I don't know, I hear Alto Nights. I don't know what that is.
We'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out what one Alto night is. Never mind two. The final bit of news we have on the release calendar front, there will be a sequel to the horror film The Black Phone, which came out, I believe that was 2021, 22. Time has had no meaning these past few years, but it was recent, and it's getting a sequel from Universal Pictures and Blumhouse. That film will be coming out on June 27th, 2025, a wide release. I mean, it's 2025, years down the line from here, but I think given the news that we have to discuss this week, box office-wise, it's a fair bet that it's going to make at least a good chunk of money, because Blumhouse has had another success courtesy of the video game adaptation Five Nights at Freddy's, debuted simultaneously in theaters and on Peacock, which is Universal's, obviously, which is their streaming service, made, I think, more money than anyone really expected it to, opening to $78 million on around 3,600 screens. Though to say like than anybody expected it to, I'm gonna put the caveat on there. Shout out to our VP of Sales, Patricia Martin, because her son Patrick back in September was talking about how, like, guys, no, you don't understand. Like, this is a big deal. He's 19, and he's like, this is such a big deal for people in my age group. Like, you don't know, so many people are going to show up for this. And I was kind of like, okay, I don't know, it's day and date. How much, are people really going to come out and see it in theaters, or are they going to stay at home and watch it on Peacock? And they came out in droves. Chad, can you give us a little rundown of some of the numbers here, domestically and internationally, and what kind of records got broken? Because there were a lot of them.
Yeah, domestically, it opened to 78 million, 58% male, 80% under 25. So that youth audience that you mentioned, over 21,000 per screen average there. And then internationally, it opened in 60 markets at 52.6 million. Mexico, UK, and Brazil, the top three there. But yeah, it holds the record now as the number one Halloween weekend release of all time, which previously the record holder there was Puss in Boots, ironically, which held that spot for 12 years and kept all the horror films away. But Freddy's has come in as the top Halloween weekend film there.
Highest opening for any PG-13 horror film. I'm sure it being PG-13 was a definite factor in it bringing so many people, specifically so many young people, out over the opening weekend. I mean, it had like a $21,000 per theater average domestically, which is nuts. It's insane. It's the biggest Blumhouse global opening of all time, the third largest debut for any horror film ever, behind only It and It Chapter 2. And we also hear from Universal with regards to streaming numbers on Peacock that it's tracking to have the biggest opening ever for a film on Peacock, and that it has been the most watched and most subscription driving content title. As always, anything to do with streaming records or streaming numbers, grain of salt, because we don't have those numbers from any sort of outside source. But yeah, a ton of people got out to see this one. It definitely, Patricia Martin's son was proven right here. Chad, you caught this one. What did you think?
I think it's going to be an entry horror movie for the current generation of tweens and preteens. Unless you're in that age range, it's not particularly scary. And if you've ever seen a horror movie, there's nothing necessarily new. There's a long setup that doesn't really make sense, but it's a fun Halloween watch. And especially if you're at a screening that has that younger demo.
I'll say though, the thing about this movie is it's not scary, but it's really grim. Like, it's a bleak movie, and it like kind of shockingly so in some ways. I would just say, yeah, almost shockingly so. I think I expected more scares, and I didn't really expect the degree to which it's just like a really kind of ugly worldview, and it reflects a lot of things, which I think horror does very well. And it just, like, in that, I think there's something to this movie, even though, as has been said, it's not really a film for, a 30 and over audience. And if you don't know the property that it's based on, you might be, if not lost, just left wondering kind of what's happening. I was pretty amused. There's a point towards the end of the movie during a major set piece where a bunch of stuff happens, and I found myself thinking, like, what is going on exactly, as one of the characters in the movie says, what's going on? And so there's a little self-awareness there.
Yeah. For those of us with memories of childhood birthdays at Chuck E. Cheese, I felt like the abandoned children's pizza palace was somehow oddly nostalgic. There's probably a good metaphor in there for adults who've neglected their inner child.
I would disagree with that completely. I think the movie explicitly tells you that nostalgia is a prison and that it will destroy you. Like, that is the movie for me.
Which is interesting, because I think there's a case to be made that nostalgia is if not a big reason, at least a substantial reason why this movie made so much. I mean, the original Five Nights at Freddy's, it was a video game. It's been a couple, but the franchise started in 2014. And I know this is a movie, like, this is an adaptation that has long been in the works. It's been an adaptation where fans of the franchise were like, I don't know how they're going to adapt this. There's no like storyline per se in the video games. So it feels like people maybe who grew up playing this series were super excited to see it and to make an event of it by going to see it in theaters because of nostalgia. I mean, I'm sure that played a factor with people across all age groups just going out in droves to see the Super Mario Brothers movie earlier this year. We saw it a few years back with Minions and the Gentle Minions phenomenon. People like who grew up with this franchise deciding, oh, we're going to dress up in suits and we're going to go and we're going to make this a big event. So I think that is a huge takeaway from this title and from its success. And we definitely need to look at what Gen Z is feeling nostalgic about at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
Another takeaway, I mean, Russ, this is the third time recently, I believe, that there has been a Blumhouse Universal collab that has come out day and date in October. It clearly works.
Well, I mean, this worked a lot better than Halloween Kills or Halloween Ends. And I think it speaks to the level of interest in this movie. People, as we've said here already, were really interested in this film. I think it also speaks to the relative lack of saturation Peacock has in the streaming marketplace. You know, Peacock is just not a very powerful force out there. So, yeah, it says a lot more to me about where Peacock stands than it does about, you know, anything else. But clearly, the audience wanted an experience with this, and they went and got it. I'm curious to see how it holds, if it holds. It's also worth noting that this is the third major movie in the past year that really deals with child abduction in an explicit, like, text-based way. That was a thing in The Black Phone. It's a thing clearly in Sound of Freedom, and now in Five Nights at Freddy's. So that's not the trend I expected to see. Yeah,
three times is a trend there. I think definitely what this film shows us is, streaming and as we've said before a lot on this podcast, streaming and theatrical can definitely coexist. The fact that people like to watch movies on streaming platforms, even if maybe Peacock isn't necessarily at the top of people's lists, it doesn't mean that theatrical success is outside the realm of possibilities. So, and Blumhouse has cracked that formula. Five Nights at Freddy's is their 19th domestic #1 opener. Moving on down the box office chart, Taylor Swift to the Eras Tour was second at the box office, decreased 56% to 14.7 million. Based on estimates, it's closing right in on 150 million domestically. It's at like 149.3. And those numbers might change a little bit in either direction after we record this on Monday afternoon when the actuals come in. But yeah, as with Five Nights at Freddy's, definitely an instance of people wanting to go and have this communal experience. Number 3 on the list, in its second week, Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, down 61% to 9 million for a domestic total of 40 million. I had tickets to see this on Sunday, planned to see it, and then I found out my mom fell and broke her hip and had to have surgery, so I did not see it. But
oh no,
she's fine apparently. But I didn't get my Scorsese fix this weekend, so I'll have to duck out at some point. And then speaking of Angel Studios, number 4, After Death, opening weekend, 5 million on around 2,600 screens. This is a documentary about various people who have had near-death experiences. Chad, we were trying to figure out before recording, like, would this be the highest grossing doc of the year so far? And does a concert film count as a doc? Because if so, you have Taylor Swift and you have the reissue of Stop Making Sense. But I think regardless of whether like it has that particular record at this point, number 4 opening for a documentary is very good here. Angel Studios has found a lot of success. If we say, looking at the results of Five Nights at Freddy's, that we can't discount or underestimate the youth audience, with Angel Studios, we can't discount or underestimate the faith-based audience. We've seen this time and time again, particularly this year. And Angel Studios really has, they also announced in this past week, they've launched this industry promotions fund with the Cinema Foundation, which is affiliated with NATO. They do National Cinema Day. So this fund is designed to engage in, various initiatives to drive people to the cinema. They're definitely a smaller distributor that has had a lot of success, really working closely with exhibitors to drum up support. I know that oftentimes the faith-based audience, like, they don't tend to buy tickets in advance. It's not so much like a pre-sale heavy genre, but working with exhibitors and doing promo, they are getting those walk-up audiences. And then closing out the top 5, we are back to the horror genre with Exorcist Believer, earning $3.1 million, bringing its total to just a smidge under 30 million. Chad, what was out limited release? Because we're getting into the prestige award season time of the year.
Exactly. And Priscilla opens November 3rd. It was open in limited 4 theaters and brought in 133,000 in New York and LA from May 24 there. And then The Holdovers, Focus Features, and 6 theaters in New York and LA brought in 200,000. That's expanding to 60 theaters across 20 markets next week. And then we'll eventually go wide on November 22nd.
So definitely, I've heard a lot of good things about The Holdovers that make me excited to see that one.
Me too.
Ditto Priscilla, about Priscilla Presley from Sofia Coppola and A24. Our long-range forecasting for that has it opening in the $3 to $8 million range for a domestic total of 10 to 27 million total. Definitely not huge blockbuster numbers, but nobody really ever expected that to happen. So yeah, this is one that I'm pumped to see. Well, thank you, Russ and Chad, for joining us this week to break down the success of Five Nights at Freddy's. And hopefully by the time we record next week, we'll have some positive news with regard to the strike. After this short break, we'll cut to our feature, an interview with Rebecca Stein, VP of Studio Marketing at National Amusements, specifically their U.S. arm, Showcase Cinemas. Be right back. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining me on our first double Rebecca episode of the Box Office Podcast, I think.
It'll be a spin-off soon. We'll see. We'll see how I do.
Rebecca squared, yeah. So next year, that's your 25th year with National Amusements, right? You're coming up on like the big round anniversary.
Yeah, I think in February I hit 25 years, something that, certainly when I started, I would have never imagined. But all in all, I think it's gone by pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. How did it start? I mean, how did you end up with National Amusements? Yeah, give me a little bit of your background.
Yeah, the long story short is that I worked in a couple of different PR firms in Boston, and I was young and really had to improve my writing skills. And I did a course at Emerson College in writing for press releases. And that class that I took, I think it was on Thursday evenings, there was a group of 4 or 5 people from National Amusements who were sent from the publicity department to work on their writing skills.
Oh, okay.
And class with these people. And when I learned that they were doing essentially PR and marketing, which we really didn't call it in those days, it was more publicity. When I learned that they were doing that for the movies, I knew I had to connect and stay in touch. And I did that. I became friendly with them and just wanted to know whenever there was a job opening. And lo and behold, probably a few months later, they were looking for an additional entry-level publicity person. And while the interview process took a lengthy period, it all worked out. So
that's great.
That's the story.
Yeah, 99. That was a good year for movies. That was like a really good year for movies. What came out that year? That was like The Matrix was that year. A lot of good
Wow.
stuff to market.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. Although at the time when I first started, we had an in-house agency as well as doing our own corporate programs and marketing. I was doing some field publicity for New Line Cinema and for Paramount at the time, within four walls kind of thing. And now I won't remember exactly the name, but it had a running with brides scene with Chris O'Donnell.
Yes,
This is not good.
I can visualize the poster.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, in this case, we were charged with hunting down as many cheap wedding dresses as we could and getting, brides to run through the streets of Boston. And at the time, I was also working on Flint, Michigan field publicity. And, we had to execute these real grand stunts, which were part of how movies were marketed on a regular basis at that point. And I think during our discussion, we'll come full circle on that because it's certainly something that we're trying to do more these days.
It feels like, that's one of the things I always really like about going to the shows and talking to people who've been in the industry back when there was kind of more of that fun stuff or the more kind of out there. Someone was saying, I don't remember who it was, but when Soylent Green came out, they did like a green icy, not realizing what the movie was gonna turn out to be. But what changed to make that not so much a thing anymore? Was it just like the internet kind of made everything more, it's more effective and efficient to kind of sit behind a desk and work at it from that perspective? Because I do feel like we've lost some of that a little bit.
Well, so I think what happened was, a choice of marketing dollars, right? So you could do a big stunt that cost a lot of money at the end of the day, or you could start to target people in a digital way and spend the dollars that way. And I think we've seen that change with all, marketing across all platforms and all industries. The thing about our industry that as that changed, we lost a little bit of the magic. There's always the magic of the movies, but a little bit of the magic.
The showmanship that you had back in.
Since I've kind of grown up at National Amusements, Showcase Cinemas, that was always a part of our DNA, this showmanship. From a theater opening, we would have celebrities and exciting things happening all, for a couple weeks around the openings, to creating experiences beyond the screen so that the theater is way more than the screen. I love that now, and I know we're going to get into it. I too much, but I am super excited to talk about this stuff because I think it is where we need to be thinking. It's very much how we are reacting now and marketing now. We'll talk more about that.
How those early days at National Amusements, you'd never worked in the cinema space before, what was that early process like of, did you have any mentors who could because it can be a pretty insular industry.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting that you pose the question that way, because it was Elaine Purdy who hired me, and she grew up in the business. Both her parents had met in the business, and in Boston in the movie business, and had worked for General Cinema, and she had worked for studios. And anyway, so she hired me. And that was the most fortunate thing in so many ways. I will restrain myself, almost get emotional just thinking about how fortunate and fortuitous it was to connect with Elaine, who certainly has become one of my bestest friends, but also one of the strongest mentors that I've had. So Elaine, even though she, knew it all front and back, she's just such a caring person. And she really took me under her wing very early and trained me in a way that we were just doing it together in some ways. She, early on pushed me and gave me confidence and didn't make me feel like an outsider, which did happen a little bit within the department to some extent because people knew this stuff and everyone seemed to be in it for so long. Even the young people had already been in it. But Elaine's warmth and patience, and certainly I came in feeling a little cocky out of these PR firms, but I was a kid, and she would call me out on some of that behavior, which I needed. And thank goodness that she did that. But she also put a lot of trust in me and let me soar and made sure that if it was something that I was doing that got the recognition for it, she let me shine. And I definitely have taken so many pages out of her book as I lead a team now. So I can't, Elaine she in general just taught me even to be more creative, to push myself. And she taught me true kindness, which is actually just more effective in life.
Yeah, just don't be a jerk. You'd be surprised how well that works sometimes.
A lot of people don't realize how well that works.
But looking back at the period that she did encourage you to go out and try new things and just these strange, wacky ideas, like running a whole bunch of brides in old 80s wedding dresses, down the street. Did any campaigns stick out for you, or that you were like, oh, I'm so excited to work on this, and you really, really hit?
Yeah. Well, I will say that pretty early on, now we're Showcase Cinemas really on a daily
Showcase
basis.
US, Showcase UK.
Within the industry will be forever known as National Amusements, but I'll refer to us probably as Showcase just because that's how we are known to our customers. And shortly after joining the publicity team there, I became a young mom and was really in the kids space. It always depends at what stage of life you are is how your lens is on. And I started to know very quickly the importance of moms and kids and movie going. And so we're starting to do stuff then with loyalty, and our Star Pass loyalty program was growing, but it seemed that there was this other market and it made a lot of sense to get kids and families in young. And so at that time, I had brought to her an idea of a kids movie club and a kids loyalty program, which is called the Popcorn Club. And it was quickly embraced yeah, go do it. Go do it. And I had to learn a lot fast and work with IT and work with, concessions. It was the first program that I was kind of on my own and had to work with all these new teams. Fast forward 20 years later, and the Popcorn Club is going strong. So that is something I'm very proud of. It's a program that's very effective and that all our studio partners have come to count on too for us reaching a young family movie-going audience. And, that's another thing I could talk about for a long time because I'm kind of, I'm pretty passionate about it. But we have a very captive audience in these members, and they show up and we give them great perks and experiences and things like that. But it started a long time ago, and now it's in the great hands of my team. And I want to acknowledge some of my team. I have Rachel Lule, who works with me and who really makes all these things keep going and come to life. And it's important I have a big team now and they're incredible, but just as Elaine did for me, I want to recognize them for sure. So the things that we did and continue to do from a community focus, they always have kind of this doing good angle. And that's where I really want to acknowledge, you asked me about mentors, and I've had the real privilege of working for Shari Redstone for all those 25 years. And what Shari taught me and has showed me is giving back. I mean, she's taught me a lot of things that I've, watched her in business, which is something
That
that
meant to have been like that's a perk at landing at National Amusements. You get to
absolutely, absolutely. And so there are a ton of examples I could give about everything that Shari has showed me by example. Something I have had the privilege of working on with her are our community efforts and giving back. And through all that work, I was able to start the Showcase for Good programming. And even when early on we talked about a kids program, it made better sense to have reading attached to it. Because what we had learned with a partner at the time is that reading for children slipped during the summer months. And so it was something that we could say to the communities. We partnered with all the libraries that we were not only offering kids this fun movie experience, but it was to encourage summer reading. So that was certainly, giving back to the community. Our programs like Holiday Classics, where people for their price of admission during the holiday months are a canned good for a local food pantry. And we've built from there. So our Showcase for Good programming, which the sensory program falls under that a little bit, but we also feel that's just in general important offering for so many who have sensory issues, these days so much more aware of, right? So, but we do partner under Showcase for Good with local nonprofit organizations in our communities. And it's some of the best, most proud work that I get to do these days. So,
are you from Boston? Is that where you grew up? Or what was the Boston cinema that you would go to as a kid?
Yes, I have to admit, I have not gone far from home. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm just probably 6 minutes down the road, kind of from Newton. But so my two local movie theaters, and it was two because they were close together and they didn't play day and date. So it depended on who was playing what. So one theater was the General Cinema in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, where now we proudly have a theater, Superlux Theater, which I can talk to you a little about in a minute. But then the other theater was a National Amusements. It was the Circle Cinema in Cleveland Circle, which is kind of Boston, Brookline, Massachusetts. So, yeah, and so interesting. So my earliest movie memory, which I actually confirmed with my mom just a little while ago when I knew that question was coming. My earliest memory is seeing Pete's Dragon. She said it was at the Chestnut Hill General Cinema, and that was 1977. So I was about 4 years old, and I remember it. Like, I remember feeling small, but that big screen, just being in awe of that big screen. And I loved that movie. In fact, when my kids were little, I was like, you have to see Pete's Dragon. And I don't know
Underappreciated in
that
its time.
I did show it to them because it stuck with me. And, I don't know that it translated as well for them, but that was my first movie and I was 4. And then the other memory that popped into my mind that also was at that General Cinema was Annie. When the movie Annie opened, which was early 80s, I think probably like 80. Well, it's probably like 1982 because I'm now associating it with something. But they had a Sandy. I don't know if it was actually Sandy the dog, but they had a Sandy the dog.
Oh.
And I remember waiting in line and they had Sandy the dog there, whether, I'm sure there were many, many Sandys, but yeah, so that's an early childhood movie memory that is pretty cool.
And that's why you have to get the kids in early because, there's,
I
don't know, you get a little cynical growing up or, less receptive to just kind of the magic of purely living in an experience because you don't have any worries. You get fed, you have a place to live. You're fine. And it's kind of, do you feel like we're losing that a bit? I mean,
well, here's the thing. That's what we are working to do with Popcorn Club. It really, we have members who are 2 years old We encourage parents to sign their kids up early. There's perks, and there's events like, we're working with Paramount now on some early screenings of Paw Patrol, and we're inviting Paw Patrol members to see it early, but it not just be the movie. Beforehand, in the lobby, we're bringing in some children's music makers and doing some crafts, and we'll have some fun food so that it really touches those sweet points for kids and it sticks. And that hopefully, someday when they're getting interviewed by you, they'll remember those moments. So
it's good. Before I was at Boxoffice, I did more like the B2C consumer facing entertainment journalism. And so much of that has gone towards influencers. I mean, press screenings nowadays are like, they're mostly influencers. And I feel like it's something that the industry is maybe a little slow to catch up. I mean, I just remember when the Gentle Minions thing happened and nobody knew it was coming. You started the National Amusements TikTok. I don't even know how TikTok works, so I can't judge anybody else for not knowing how TikTok works. But
yeah, no, that was a pivotal moment because that did just come, and then we kind of learned about it. But quickly after that happened, we knew that we had to be on TikTok. We're having great success with, we now generate content every week that is, we've set aside time. We have people who are on this. I mean, it's obviously all social media is so key right now and keeps us connected in a different way and gives each theater circuit, as you follow everybody, it's giving us voices that are differentiated from each other, which is nice too. But back to influencers, it is a key part of our strategy. We are definitely spending marketing dollars on influencers. We have really been doing a program of influencer screenings, and each one has to be curated with the right influencer. We are creating atmospheres that give that full picture. So I know that I had sent you some pictures from our Barbie influencer event. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was no stone unturned, from obviously the custom cocktail menu that looks exactly the part, of the movie.
It was perfect. And everybody did so much, I mean, to different degrees, and different people have different resources and everything. But
if we're seeing a movie early and loving it as a team, we want to get behind it. And that happened recently with Gran Turismo. We all loved it. And it was reaching out to Anne Elizabeth Azzoni and saying, I want to get behind this. And we want to get influencers in because their reach that we've been building and building our lists of influencers is the best we can do right now. So, I mean, they came in, there was custom drink menus, everything had, black and white checkered flags.
And they're there with the cameras and the rigs and
We had a tire changing station, which, where they picked up their drinks. And it just, we are really into the party planning, all the details to make sure that they leave with a full experience of what it mean to go out to the movies. That was a black and white party. We saw everybody come out in pink for Barbie. We're giving people reason to dress up for the movies.
I mean, after the last few years, like you need a reason to dress up. You need that little prod after years of living in your pajamas. Like it's bringing back some of the showmanship.
Yeah. So we are all about it. It's a big part of the strategy. And now what is happening is people are asking us, how do we get on your list? That is transcending the air a bit. It's great. So what we're building with our influencers in all different markets, in all kind of different lanes and genres is fantastic.
So are you working with like hyper kind of local people for each theater? Because I know like just find influencers, people don't always necessarily know where to start with a lot of this tech stuff. Or are you just looking at people who are like that is their local theater?
Yeah, their local theater or area. A lot of our influencers kind of cover, bigger markets or New England region, but it depends. And we have a couple national influencers who we've kind of lucked into to some extent, who are Showcase moviegoers, and they're happy to help us. So that's been as well. Yeah, well, we're having a good time with the influencers, and they love what we're providing. So it's been a good two-way street.
I feel like Gentle Minions is chapter 1 of like, oh God, there's this whole world and we kind of don't know what it's about or how to, you don't want to kind of storm your way in without knowing what you're doing and look ridiculous or anything like that. And then you have Barbie, which is like chapter 2, and it just felt like lightning in a bottle.
And I think everybody as an industry needs to look to what happened with Barbie and try to replicate it as best we can. I mean, a movie like Barbie, not only do you have a superpower like Warner Brothers behind it, but Mattel was behind that too and it infiltrated. I've never seen anything like it from a marketing perspective. There was no company that didn't want to attach to
all the like pink everything. It was, and even after the movie came out, it wasn't like, okay, opening weekend, Monday, over. Like it felt like in terms of really capturing the marketing, and that was the training wheels run, and now the training wheels are off a little bit.
I believe that when you have someone also like Margot Robbie, who she was everywhere and did an amazing job for that movie. We saw it with Tom Cruise for Top Gun. He was key. So I do hope that from a studio perspective, that is being recognized as really important as people look at how these movies are being marketed. We need to make sure that the talent is really part of the strategy in a big way.
Like it's star power. Send people out. You had like John Krasinski going out and during Quiet Place and everything. Like
he's another great example. But it's beyond just the star power. It's that these people, their passion for their project comes out. And I think that's important.
Like they do it at CinemaCon to get the industry excited. And now they do it like on a more micro level.
We all feel, even though we're in it, right? We go to CinemaCon and we're recharged. We feel we're part of something so much bigger. And every filmmaker says, I'm making this for the big screen. And that's another important thing that I've always, the past several years been talking to studio partners, that we need to be thanking our audience and telling our audience the same thing. So I also, encourage adding that message to every movie. Thank the moviegoer, whether it's the talent or the filmmaker. We need to appreciate the moviegoer and understand that they're not hearing the Kool-Aid that we're drinking ourselves, because no doubt all of it is part of this magic.
You have to nurture it. It's not just gonna...
Exactly. And I think the recipe is there, but we need to pay attention to it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Box Office Podcast. We will be back next Thursday for all of the box office and news from the cinema exhibition community. The Box Office Podcast is co-produced by Box Office Pro, the Box Office Company, and Record Edit Podcast. If you like the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share with your friends and colleagues. Thanks again.